Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an assortment of terrifying encounters to share with you. Before we get into these encounters, though, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version. Written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. They're available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links to those books are also in the description below. Now, everyone, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. This happened many years ago. We were out at the mountains hiking with classmates. The night descends, the other half of the class decided to stay at the lodging, but we were more cocky and planned to be outside in the wilderness. Our teacher closed the door just to be sure the others didn't hang around in the dark and get lost. Let's be honest, she was right. We headed down the lane when one of my friends said that they had to pee. Our teacher answered and said she wasn't opening the door, so move behind the house and do the business. We laughed at him as he ran behind the cabin with a wide smile. Then a terrifying scream hit our ears. My friend was rushing toward us, screaming that something was behind the cabin. We laughed at him, thinking it was just a joke. But before we could finish congratulating him, we saw the creature. It was at least 5 feet tall, standing on 4 legs. It would have been much taller on 2. Its arms were similar to human arms with long claws. The legs were human. It rushed toward us just like a man on 4. Its eyes were a glowing red and orange. The face seemed too short to be a dog's, and let me tell you, there are no wolves in that area. Not even a bear has been reported for many years. And the feature was both canine and human-like. Long, black, matted hair covered its body. It let out this horrifying roar and started to chase us. The door opened and closed. We had no time to open it. Our teacher started running down the road with us. Our teacher and myself, with 10 to 12 other kids, we dashed into the forest, God knows for what reasons. We heard the creature wheeze. We heard it growling. We heard how the tree cracked under its weight. For a short period, it became louder and louder, but suddenly, getting further and further, we circled a large area and returned to the lodging. All of us. We were all shocked. Some of us were crying. Myself and one of my friends, who was as brave and curious as I, decided that we had to ask the locals about this thing, creeping around the next day. Some of them didn't want to talk to us, and some of them told us, yes, there is something that hunts those woods. Some farmers had lost sheep, cows, and even horses, while other dogs have gotten ripped off their chains and torn apart. We didn't find out much more, but I started to do some research on the internet for similar experiences like mine and my home country, Central Europe. I read a guy's report who shared with others that something like a huge creature killed 16 sheep under one night. The door was closed, but whatever the creature was, it ripped it open and gutted a lot of sheep. There are no bear in our country, and they saw a lot of huge claw marks on those dead animals. We have jackals in the area, but what kind of dog-like animal would do that? There are no big cats in this country. Within days, it killed several dogs and sheep again. Later then, he saw some very large black creatures running through the tall grass, behind each other in one row, and sometimes people heard terrifying roars coming from the dark. Even their animals behaved strangely, so the guardian dogs, just like the cattle and sheeps. Knowing our fauna, there is nothing that could do similar things at all. Even a person from the zoo who knew many animals confirmed this, and I never heard about raiding werewolves. I'm also had some strange experiences with human-like creatures, and years ago I encountered something that was able to mimic human sound, but in a very odd way, and it wasn't even on my official language, but something unknown, one I had never heard before on this continent at all. I don't know what's going on, and I don't know what I should think about these encounters or creatures. Today's second encounter brings us back stateside. When I was younger, sometimes at night I would hear weird noises at my old childhood home, which was in the country town in Wisconsin, with a population of almost 10,000. I would hear or sometimes see things at times when I was living there. It would range from weird scratching, knocking, weird animal noises, all the way to seeing bright glowing eyes, constantly peering out from the darkness of the thicket between the house from across the street. I honestly don't know what it was, but almost at least once a week at night I would see those eyes. Here is where it gets weirder for me. Sometimes I would run back and forth in the kitchen since I wouldn't be allowed to go out at night past 9, and I needed to get my energy out since I had ADHD, and I don't have a good outlet for it. But anyway, one night I was dancing around a little. My dad fell asleep on the living room couch, having passed out from coming back from work, and I had my earbuds in with a little lamp that sat in the corner of the kitchen counter. When I was doing this, I saw something out of the corner of my eye as I turned around. It was just almost out of my peripheral vision. I stopped and turned back to the window, which is in front of the sink and faced outwards towards the street. From what I saw, the thing I saw seemed like a doggish-like figure. It was kind of ashen gray color, with short hair that looked like it's almost non-existent. The ears sort of clipped at the tips, and you could sort of see its ribs, and it stopped near the streetlight. I had initially thought it was a stray dog, or a dog that had escaped from the shelter, as that tended to happen a lot because of the terrible funding the shelter had. The streetlight that was at the corner of the sidewalk washed over the dog as it edged closer to the honey yellow light, and I could see that it did not look right. Like, not sickly looking, but sort of unnatural in the way that people need to take a double take to confirm what they had just seen. The dog was indeed an ashen gray color, and did look like it had clipped ears, like I thought before, but its mouth looked weird. It was awkwardly stuck in a crooked position. You may think the dog may have been in an accident or came from an abused home. But you see, most dogs who have bodily problems like that usually were put down because many of them couldn't eat or live properly without assistance, and the shelter couldn't afford to do that sort of thing at the time. And many people didn't want to adopt a dog like that. So it was already weird to see a dog with that physical issue walking around without a collar and no owner. I had taken out my earbuds at this time and opened the window a crack. I really don't know why, maybe to call it, or maybe I thought it would see me better. As I opened the window, it seemed to have heard the noise and turned its head toward me, which, thinking about it now, was practically impossible, cause it barely made any noise beside a light scuffling sound as I pushed it open. As the thing faced me, I saw something very disturbing. Its teeth. Its teeth, they weren't canine-like. They were like humans, but arranged to fit in a dog's mouth. And its eyes were huge and red, not an amber color, a red color, but glowing, like when you use a flash on a camera at someone and their eyes flash red. And it smiled at me. Well, I think it tried to smile, but its jaw was still in that awkward position, and its weirdly long, tongue lolled out. In a calm panic, I quickly shut the window hard and locked it. That seemed to make it stop staring. It tilted its head toward me one last time before shutting its mouth and dashing out of the street lamp's light and out into the darkness of the street ahead. I vaguely recall that it didn't have a tail, or maybe it was just a really stubby one. I can't say for sure, but I don't want to remember. After this encounter, I locked all the windows and made sure the doors were locked and had at least one light on wherever I went. And I was very scared for the rest of the week. I would hear scratches on the garage door, which had another door that was connected to the front part of the garage, and that connected to the living room. The other noises started 3 days after the scratching started, and I refused to look out the window or open it, or any of the doors. My dad never heard anything. He's a really sound sleeper and can't wake up to save his own life. After the 7th day of the noises, they stopped. But the stupid, distorted animal noises, a mixture of dog and screeching like a bird, and something else remained until the last day. After the 7th day, nothing like that ever happened again. Though sometimes at night I would see those red eyes or hear a distant animal noise, but never close enough for me to feel like it was targeting me again. I stayed at that house for another year or so before I moved to my mom's for other reasons unrelated to this. But half a year ago I started to hear growling noises near my window, but they weren't of any distinct animal. Like it was inhuman but animalistic, if that makes any sense. I'm still scared every once in a while, and constantly paranoid at night. Just make sure everything is locked and there's a light on in the room before I do anything, but I haven't heard anything or seen anything since. Today's third part of the upload. First, my uncle's encounter, because I think this one is much more interesting. I wasn't there to experience it firsthand, but he swears up and down that it's true. My uncle and his twin were going door to door selling candy bars for a fundraiser for a school in rural Michigan in the early 80s. It was getting to be dusk, and they decided to wrap things up, hit one more house, then go home. The last house is a house that sits at a dirt road intersection, sort of on the top of a capital T-shaped intersection, so that the front of the house faces the bottom of that T. Facing from the house down to the road that makes up the vertical part of the T. That's the wooded lot on the right side of the road, and the field is on the left side of the road. Anyway, they finish up making their pitch to this house and walk down the driveway. And as they get to the road, there's this thing that comes out of the woods. My uncle said the closest description he could give was it looked like a puma. At this point, they are sort of scared, like anyone would be if they spotted a puma as a kid. But nothing seems out of the ordinary about the puma itself. It gets about halfway across the road, the vertical part of the T, stops and looks at them, and then stands on its hind legs, sprints across the remainder of the road, leaps over the embankment on the far side of the road, and runs across the field and into the woods in the distance. After it stood up, it remained on 2 legs until it disappeared into the tree line. They are understandably freaked out, run back to the house, asked to use the people's phones to have the parents pick them back up, being too scared to walk home. Now on to my experience. This occurred in north-central North Carolina. If anyone cares, I used to work the second shift at Walmart, meaning I got off at 1 in the morning. I was driving home, and there's this portion of the drive where it's not uncommon to see deer at night. The section is a bridge where there is a lake to the left, a spillway that goes under the bridge, and a big swampy wooded area to the right. I get to this area and I see what I think is a group of deer crossing the road, barely illuminated by my headlights, so I slow down like anyone else would. As I get closer, I realize that there's at least 6 of these things, which would be a lot for deer. And they weren't running like deer at all, even though they were running at least as quick as a deer does. Deer run sort of up and down, bounding motion. These things were running like dogs do, when at quick-paced walk, alternating legs diagonally from each other. But again, they were moving quick. Right as the last one crosses, and I am close enough to get a pretty good look at it, the last one turns its head and looks at me while it's running. And I get a good look at its face. It looks canine. But the whole group was at least as big as the average deer in the area. Unless there's a pack of Great Dane running around rural North Carolina, I don't know what it was that I saw. Today's fourth encounter. I'm an avid hunter, and every year in my early 20s I would spend every weekend in the woods at our national park near Oklahoma, close to Red River. I'd normally trek out about 2 to 3 miles. My first encounter was about 10 years ago. I had set up along a clearing and was a good 20 feet up a tree. As dawn was approaching, I had a large 12-point buck slowly coming into the clearing, about 300 to 400 yards off. I let it come closer and took aim and shot at it in the kill zone through the heart and lungs with my .30-06, 195 grain ballistic tip round. After watching it fall through my scope, I slung my gun and was getting ready to climb down out of the tree. I watched this deer get up and run back into the woods on its back legs. I had no idea what had just happened, but I've heard stories of these creatures in my youth from my grandfather, who is half Native American, so I noped it out of there after that. A few years later, I was in the same area hunting. I had set up my stand and ladder the previous day. Around midnight, hiked out to my stand so I could be ready for dawn. I got to my stand around 2 in the morning and was waiting patiently. After a couple hours, around 6 a.m., just 30 minutes till sunup, I heard something grab a hold of my ladder. Then it sounded like something was climbing up my ladder. I pointed my rifle straight down and fired. I hit something on the first shot and heard a scream. So I naturally emptied the rifle, still pointing straight down my ladder. I did not dare look down for fear of what I had heard in the stories of locking eyes with these creatures. I pulled out my .357 mag revolver and proceeded to empty the cylinder toward the sound of movement I heard. Once that was spent, I reloaded it and continued the barrage. There was still something out there, and I could hear it. I had one gun with ammo left and pulled out my 9mm that I kept with me for self-defense. So, just in case. I fired a few rounds toward the noise I heard. Then I waited till morning, a few rounds left in my 9mm, and clutching it for dear life. When morning came, I looked at my surroundings and climbed down the tree. Around my tree was a dark, blackish blood, and it went off deeper into the woods. I hiked the trail as fast as I could, and when I got there, I saw someone else in the distance. He was going in the same direction I was, and he also looked scared. I reloaded everything I had while he was closing the distance, and once he got closer, I asked him if he was heading out as well. He told me that he heard a lot of gunshots earlier and a scream. I asked him where he was posted up, and he pointed in the direction that I saw the blood trail go to. He said he heard something run by him after the gunshot stopped, and when dawn hit, he saw something animalistic running around on 2 legs. I got his name. We'll call him Jim, and he told me we should get out of the woods. He was native to the area and half Cherokee, and told me if what he saw was what he thought, we needed to leave. We got out of the woods. Surprisingly, we were both parked in the same area. We shared a beer, and around noon summoned up enough courage to get our stuff. After a slow hike, we went to my stand first. My steel ladder that was secured by ratchet straps and bungees to the tree was ripped from the tree. It was bent and torn up. My tree stand is still in that tree to this day, I assume. He looked at the blood trail and went white. The tracks were a mix of human and canine. We made it to his tree stand after a bit. He was only 800 feet from where I was, surprisingly. His gear was strewn across the forest floor like mine, a bent ladder. But unlike my tree stand, his had been ripped off the tree and thrown. We both left the area and went back to our vehicles. So after that last encounter, Jim and I traded phone numbers and hung out when I went up there to hunt. It kind of became the thing to do, hunt together. He knew the woods better than I did, and he was good company. About 2 years after the incident that caused us to meet, we were posted up in a blind in the clearing. We generally put our stands close and hunted back to back in a blind over the 2 years we hunted together. If one of us had a shot when we were in the blind, we would signal the other with a tap in the back from our elbow. That morning, both of us had a shot. We both fired. I hit the doe I was aiming at square in the chest. As it went down, it turned and ran on its back legs, dead sprinting into the woods. Jim's quarry did the same after he hit it. We went and investigated, and once the animals turned, the hoof prints got larger and then changed to human tracks. Jim said we should leave, and I wasn't going to disagree with him. We both stopped hunting those woods after that encounter. I have no clue to this day what it was we encountered in those woods. I've heard of creatures and stuff like that before, but just tales. They're more durable. I used a 30-06 with a 195 grain ballistic tip round every time I went hunting. But those are my encounters. I hope that you guys get something from them. Today's final encounter. This happened last weekend while camping in northern Utah. We had just gotten to our campsite around 4 p.m. My friend needed to use the bathroom, so she walked up a little into the woods near the campsite that was empty. As she walked up, I saw her stop for a minute and was looking around. I asked her if she wanted me to go with her. We were both girls, and she said she was fine. Went to the bathroom and came back. Later that night, we were sitting around the fire with 2 other friends, and she seemed like she was on edge. I started poking fun at her, as that's how we joke with each other, and she told me she had seen something just past the tree line as she was walking up to go to the bathroom. She described it as having pale skin. The face looked like a mixture of a human and a canine with black eyes. It was hunched over on all fours, and its back legs looked distorted. And she said that she could tell it would be tall if it were to stand on its hind legs. She also saw a spine protruding from its back. While telling her sister what she had told me, she also said that while she was up there, it had walked directly in front of her, stopped, and stared at her, so she just came back to the campsite. Her sister says it was the most likely a hairless bear or coyote, although bears are super uncommon up here. Or a wolf with mange. I personally don't know what to think. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed today's upload. May seems to be looking like a good month. I'm going to call Mr. Baker tonight. That's Tim Coonbo Baker, a good friend of mine. I'm also going to call a friend, or I talked to a friend earlier today that I've not spoken to in about a year, Jody Cook. And I wanted to bounce a couple of things off of him. And apparently we're going to get together a little later tonight and talk about a couple of things. I will share later, I guess, what that topic was, but it's very important to me and to a lot of people. So with that, I'm going to bid y'all farewell, and thank you, and see ya!